to get that help. She had to do it herself, and unfortunately she didn't.
Ultimately, it was more painful to live.
I believe so. I mean, it's a funny thing to say, really, but if I'd maybe been she was so determined, it was almost as if it was her choice. But because I know...
listen, we're just losing you. Your line's you're just coming in and out, We'll try and get a slightly better line.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you, Joe. I'll come back to you, Joe, and we'll get a reaction about Alexis.
I'm in the middle of a field.
It's all right. It's okay. It's mobile phones. Alistair Campbell joins us, who's just written the book The Happy Depressive, a man who suffered from depression. Alistair, when did it start in your life?
I don't know, because I only really confronted it when I had a breakdown when I was 28. And what happened was I had a breakdown, and as a result of it, I was advised to stop drinking, which I did. And I thought that if I did that, everything was going to be fantastic. And then I realised that actually it kept coming back, even though I wasn't drinking. So I think I'd probably been drinking because of the depression. And then when I wasn't drinking, I felt rather sort of cheated that I'd done what the doctors told me to do, and yet it kept coming back. And I've now reached a situation where I've sort of learnt to live with it. My depressions are almost cyclical. They kind of just come round every few months, and you develop certain strategies to deal with them. But as you've just heard, for some people, that's just it's not good enough. And I think you put the right question there when you said to the caller there that, you know, for some people it's just easier to not to live, and that is a horrible place to be. But
you've been there.
Well, I've described my depressions when they're really bad. It's like being dead and alive at the same time, and that is a pretty horrible feeling. And the thing I've got is that I've managed to persuade myself that when it's bad, I know that it can get better. Now, it takes you time to get to that. I've got a situation where I've got a very supportive partner, I've got a family, I've got lots of opportunities, I don't have to worry about money. I think for a lot of people that it's the sense of isolation. In fact, I'm speaking at a conference this afternoon organised by the Centre for Social Justice on mental health, and part of it is just the stigma and the taboo. People, if somebody falls ill with cancer, we all know how to react. And yet, a few decades ago, we talked about the big C. There was a taboo about cancer. Now, today, I think there's a taboo about depression. I think it's great that you're doing the subject again, and I know I was on your programme, The Big Questions, talking about it. I think the more that people are open about it, the more we realise that it is just an illness. It's an illness that some people get and some people don't. And what's heartbreaking, listening to the caller you just had there, is that, I mean, I hope she won't mind me saying this, but a parent like that is going to think for the rest of their lives, what could I have done differently? And the answer is maybe not that much, because sometimes people get depression and that is it. There's not much anybody else can do about it. But I think if as a society we can be more open about it, then the chances are that we will be able to help more people who fall ill, who at the moment feel they can't tell an employer because the employer will think they're weak and they'll want somebody who's strong. Can't tell parents because parents maybe don't understand it and they'll feel slightly ashamed. Can't tell their friends, and you just end up in this sort of spiral of increasing isolation and despair.
Thank you very much, Alistair. Dr. Ian Banks, why is it 75% men?
Well, what an interesting question, because we're struggling with this ourselves and we're supposed to be the experts. What I do know is this, is that the perception of risk for men with regard to suicide is very low. If we ask men what kills young men most, we ask young men this, testicular cancer or suicide, the vast majority of them choose testicular cancer. Well, there are around about 60 to 70 deaths a year from testicular cancer, and there are 3,000 deaths a year from suicide. So men's own awareness into suicide is already bad. But what also is depressing in all these things is the attitude of the medical profession sometimes. And I'm speaking from my position as on BMA Council here and spokesman on mental health. But unfortunately, there is a feeling sometimes of fatalism, that nothing can be done about this, that if a young man has decided to take his life, then there is nothing you can do about it. Well, actually, there's quite a lot of evidence out there that you can do something about these things. And one of the clues is that if you look at the pattern of suicide, you recognize that there are things in there about which you can do something about. So, for instance, suicide in men is predominantly in low-income group men. So there must be pressures on those men which are greater than they are on men from upper income. And it's really quite startling, the difference. In other words, the vast majority of them are in lower income group men. So there are lots of clues out there about what's happening. Also, there is the mystique about it just came out of the blue kind of a thing. Very often you find that there were clues that things were going wrong. I mean, your man Speed is a good example of this, and he was giving warning signs that something was wrong. So I think out there is far too much mystery, there's far too much myth, and there's far too much stigma, and there's not enough information and help out there to do something about something which can be addressed.
Vic, you've been waiting on the line a while. I do apologise.
It's all right. It's been worth it. That last gentleman is on the money.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had a breakdown when I was in my mid-20s. Basically, I had a job that was way too big for me. Just had a child. Just moved house. Moved country, not just moved house. A lot of pressure on me, and all of a sudden, I started to feel things happening to me that I couldn't explain. My initial reaction was to go to the medical world, all of whom either said, "Oh, it's depression, take these tablets," or "There's nothing wrong with you," or worst of all, I was referred to someone who psychoanalyzed me and gave me problems I'd never even heard of. You know, he decided I had problems with my parents. It was the first I'd ever heard of it. So I came away with a lot more problems than I started with. And I got stuck in a cycle of confusion and depression. One of the first questions that doctors ask you is, have you ever considered suicide? Yeah, of course I have. You know, because if you're in a really, really tight bind, and depression it has some horrific symptoms. When you feel like that, of course, it's an answer. It's not necessarily the one you're going to take, but I was aware of the fact that it was an answer. And I went around totally confused, gave up working. When I gave up my job, by the way, which I think is an important point, some doctor said you should take a break from work. And after a month away from work, I was considerably worse than I was when I was working. I had nothing else to do but to dwell on my own condition.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, after almost 3 years, I felt within me, I felt within me that somehow I must be generating this myself. Somehow I have to be generating this. I just didn't know how. And by a little bit of research, I came across a book by Dr. Claire Weeks, who's well known in the area. And it was at that time, it was called Self-Help for Your Nerves. And as I read through and I read about depression, I recognised myself in every single page. I recognised, yeah, that's me. That's exactly what I do. That's exactly what I've been doing. The lack of hope is a sure way to keep yourself in depression. And the whole thing generated by fear that you won't get better, fear of what it's doing to your family, fear of what the future might hold for you. And when you can eradicate fear, you eradicate the illness.
So now, how are things now?
Well, that was 30-odd years ago. Yeah, they're fine. I've just been chasing my dogs around the park. They're fine. And the gentleman who was on before was very, very good. You know, he made the point, demystify it. There's nothing mystical about it. It's an illness, like loads of other illnesses. It's just more confusing because the road to recovery is so up and down that you can hope one day, and your entire family around you can say one day, you know, he's really on the mend. We're really pleased for him.
Vic, thank you very much indeed. Thank you so much. It's worth waiting for your experiences there. It's 9:51. Samaritans have been in touch. They are there 24 hours every day for those in despair as well. And their number is 08457 90 90 90. 08457 90 90 90 90 90 90. Julian in Devon and Kerry in Sheffield after the travel news at 9:51. Orna.
Thank you, Nicky.
Hi, Julian. Hi, Kerry. Kerry, you go first. Kerry in Sheffield.
Hi.
Hi.
Where to start? My
brother killed himself 12 years ago, and he